22nd, 2019, very good. So I'm Peter Willoughby, I'm Chairman of the Parish Council. There are some members of the Parish Council about. Graham's here, Sarah and Sharon are here, and Anne's here. And we have apologies from Kira and Rob. Sorry, Peter. Laura and Peter. Was that Rob? Rob's apology. Laura and Ian, they can't be here this evening with us. So we've got various guest speakers. So we have got Jade, Dave and Chris from the A14. We've got Ken from Neighbour Watch. We've got Phil from the Town Trust. Ian's going to give us a report from Cambridgeshire County Council. David Mead, our new district councillor, is here for Fence Fountain. Got some report on the finances, report from me on the Parish Council, and we've got a report, Sarah's giving us a report on green open space this time. So, and then you'll see on the agenda it says general question time at the end, but I'm sure the speakers, A14, Neighbourhood Watch, Town Trust, Ian and David would be happy to take your questions at the end of their parts. I'm sure that would be okay. Good. So, annual review of Parish Council business. So, I'm going to sit down at this point. Otherwise I'll just be wandering around and it wouldn't be so good. So Parish Council in its present form up to 2018, because this is obviously for the year end to 31st of March, we had an election on the 3rd of May, slight change to the Parish Council there, 10 people standing for 9 places. We welcomed Laura Chorlton to the Parish Council, Chorlton, and we lost Willie. So once again I'd like to thank Willie for his hard work and support of the Parish Council since 2013. Over the last 12 months, and in fact since 2013, I've been chair and Graham's been vice chair, so I'd like to thank Graham for his continued support again. We've been both been selected by the Parish Council to continue in these roles for the coming 12 months. Jo continues to serve the Parish Council excellently in her role of clerk. It's quite a little job to try and get everything done within 10 hours a week, and she does respond in times when the workload is high, and that's much appreciated by us all. She has a job to make sure that the parish councillors work and adhere to the strict governance issues. We're not like an ordinary committee. We have to discuss things in public, and we have to remind ourselves at times that the only discussion is in public unless you're part of a working group. What's the Parish Council responsible for? It's responsible for some of the street lighting, maintenance of the ditches, ponds, trees and grass cutting. We've got a good team in John Carter, JSC Services, Bernie Ashby as our village handyman, Rodney and Macon who cuts the cricket pitch, and Duncan McMichael who's helped out on various bits over the year on open spaces, trees and ditches. We have good tree contractors, and we look at spreading work between those contractors. One of them who probably knows every tree in the village off by heart and how they've grown up over the years. We're very fortunate in that respect, and each year there's a annual tree survey done, and the work then comes as a result of it. We have a limited budget, and tree maintenance, green maintenance is the majority of the spend on that. There is a report from the Green Open Spaces, so I'm not going to say much more about that, because otherwise you won't have anything to say.
Oh, I do.
Oh, you do? Good, good. Planning, we make recommendations to Huntingdon District Council on planning applications. We don't make decisions. The Parish Council just makes recommendations or observations. We continue to hold the firework display once a year. This last year was excellent again, and thanks to all the firework team who put on the show, Feast Week for providing refreshments, and councillors and volunteers for manning the gate. Work on the A14 has commenced, and Jo has a good relationship with Jade at A14 and passes on comments that she receives from villagers. The issue of contractors' vehicles through the village has been a concern, and I know Jo continues to liaise with Jade, and there have been some steps taken recently which may have improved the situation a little, but I'm sure we'll get comment from the A14 team when we get there. Green Management Group, I've done that bit already. That heard myself. Right. Over this last year, Hilton Parish Council has worked with St Ives Town Council and other local parish councils regarding the local bus services. As you'll know, the local bus services were affected when Whippet pulled out of providing a number of services. We've joined up with this team working through St Ives. The latest stage in that development is a request has gone to Cambridgeshire County Council for a meeting on the matter, and we're waiting to hear the outcome. We haven't had a reply on that yet, have we? Helen, come in. We did some work on the District Council Development Plan, and there's been some further advices issued recently by the District Council, which will be discussed at its Parish Council meeting on the 4th of June. Over the last year, we launched a new website, which is an improvement on the previous one, and we are continuing to look to develop this over the next 12 months. We think it's worth better because it's working with a simple website design, and just for the record, we'll thank Justo again for his hard work in managing the old one. Pavilion renovation project continues, and we're looking forward to a planning application being submitted shortly following a favourable response from HDC planners. There was work done around the parish plan, and one of the things that came out there was looking at a possible cycle path between Hilton and St Ives. Unfortunately, initial route suggested has been thwarted by the design of the new bridge on the 1040, but the Parish Council will continue with the objective and try and look at a proposal that can be developed. So that's what we've done, as well as cutting the grass and maintaining the trees. It's been a good year, and I'd like to thank all the members of Hilton Parish Council for their hard work and support throughout the year. So that concludes the review of Parish Council members. I'm going to do the financial report this year to save Jo losing her voice. So the internal audit has been completed, and the accounts will be presented to be formally approved at a meeting on the 4th of June, at which point they'll be submitted to the external auditor. There's been no comments back from the internal auditor. Our opening balance in the year was £44,380. Our closing balance was £47,841. We received in the year a community infrastructure levy of £795. We had a precept of £27,570. I'm going to read this to make sure I get the figures right. Other income was £1,965, which gave us a total of £29,535 plus that civil money, community infrastructure levy. Expenditure was £27,898. We were anticipating that our expenditure would be higher, but the work on the footpaths hasn't been completed yet. That's likely to take place in this next year once we have the quotes received and the pricing is agreed. So that's the position with the finances. So that's the Parish Council bit done for the moment until we come back to green open spaces. I'd like to invite the A14 speakers to come forward. Would you like to bring chairs? And always take the oh, sorry. So we have Jade in the middle, David at the end, and Chris this side. We did submit some questions to you, didn't we?
We'll start, if it's okay with everybody, just with a quick update on where we're at with everything, and then we'll take questions.
Okay, like quick update. A good couple of months ago since I was here last. So if I start where we usually start, which is the East Coast Main Line, and I'll just work from east to west on the job. We are probably towards the back end of this year we'll have completed the bridge over the East Coast Main Line. That's due for completion in September. And then there's very little happening between there and Ermine Street just because of its location within the programme. What you will see is when you cross the A1198, if you look east-west, you'll see that there's a sizable hole being created there. That hole represents pretty much all of the material that we require for the job for section 3, which is about 1 million cube of material, and that material is currently being excavated and basically then spread to make an embankment all the way from Potton all the way through to New Barnes. That operation is ongoing. We're currently in between what we call BN12 and BN13, which is Potton and Hilton. And you'll see if you drive north up on Potton Road, if you look to your right, you'll see the guys filling the embankment there, forming the embankment for the highway to go on. Potton, you should see the diversion is due at the start of June. So we'll take you guys off the existing carriage that you're on, we'll put you over the new bridge, and then probably a month and a half, maybe 2 months, depending how we go later on, we'll then divert Hilton as well in exactly the same manner. What does that diversion look like? What does that switch look like, as we call it? Effectively, what we'll do is we'll shut it down for a weekend, so it's a Friday night through to a Monday morning, and then on that weekend you'll see, well, coming up to that weekend, you'll see us build pretty much everything offline. Then we'll shut it down for that weekend and we'll do the last little tie-ins at both ends, and then on Monday morning you go up and over the new. So that, for Hilton, that'll be a couple of months yet. And I think that's probably where we are. You won't see much more work going on the 1198 for a good couple of months, just to finish that one off until we know exactly the full extent of what we've got to do there, which is still a bit of a question, and how much we do. That's where we are construction. Unless you've got any questions.
I'll just clarify, you said Potton, you actually mean Potton Road, don't you?
Potton
Yes,
Road,
Potton
Hilton,
Road.
you mean Hilton Road?
Yes, apologies, yeah.
So I don't know, has anybody got any questions about that specifically before we move on to general questions?
I'm just slightly concerned, and I would like to make it very clear now that I've looked at that bridge, and if you're driving from St Ives to Hilton,
Yes.
I am just really concerned that you are coming off that bridge. It is quite steep coming down into Hilton, and it is straight. There might be a slight bend on the bridge, but it is straight. It looks to me like the traffic is going to do 60 miles an hour down there and hit the village. How are you going to stop that from happening?
So it's probably worth going back and just giving you a little bit of reassurance around how we design all these roads. So this question was a question that was, or sorry, the concern rather, it's not a question, it's a concern, was brought up during the development consent order examination. So that was held in kind of early to the middle of 2015, sort of March until October time. When we design these roads, so Highways England, I work for Highways England, we commission designers and contractors to do our design work for us and then obviously to build the job for us. One of the requirements that we have mandated on us is a number of road safety audits. And so what happens is Highways England hand over the design package, but we give the design package to our designers, and that's a joint venture between Atkins and the company that was called CH2M Hill, which have just been taken over by Jacobs. They design, and then we have a number of road safety audits. So it's a three-stage process. The first stage is at the end of what we call the preliminary design, so where we know what the vertical and horizontal alignments look like, so you know how the road raises and lowers obviously over the A14, and what the curvature looks like. That's a desktop exercise effectively, and what we do is an independent design assurance company that look at it independently and say, these are the concerns that we have, this is how we propose that you mitigate it. We then have a second road safety audit, which is done once the work has completed, but before the road opens to traffic. So that will probably be done on the that Dave was talking about before we do the switch. And that's to make sure that the road has been built in accordance with the design and identify any issues on the ground that you can't see, because you can't see everything on paper. You know, we all recognise that. If there are immediate concerns, depending on the severity of them, we either won't open the road, however they'd have to be very, very significant, very serious for us to not open the road, because we recognise the impact that would have on traffic. There's some other kind of temporary measures that we can do in terms of temporary speed limits, all those sorts of things. And if we need to, so we can do all those. We then have the third stage of that road safety audit, which is done a year after the road is open to traffic. And we look to see whether there are not just recorded accidents and incidents, but near misses that have been recorded to the police, to the local highways authority, things like that. So we recognise that there's a concern.
Can I just interrupt you?
Yeah.
You are talking about the design of your road.
Yeah.
And I fully understand. I am quite sure you've gone through every safety aspect that you have to do. And I'm very pleased to hear that. That's not what I'm discussing with you. You are discussing your road, and that your road, when it joins on to the old part of the Potton Road going into the village, that's not your concern. Your concern is your road. You're not concerned about how
we are.
fast
so
these cars are going to be hitting
so we
our
don't
village.
we don't just look at what we're building in isolation. We have to assess the impact of that both upstream and downstream.
So are you going to put speed cameras or some sort of checking method as soon as you open that road to check that we're not having lorries and cars smashing through our village faster than they go currently?
That's all part of the road safety audit process.
So are they going to put, so let me ask you the question, are you going to put some sort of speed monitors there as soon as you open the road to make sure that they're not smashing through our village?
So we don't routinely put any kind of speed monitoring
In that case,
devices
then I
out there.
ask, could you do it because of the angle of that road coming into our village? Would that be possible for you to do, please, for our village? It would be great if you could, because then it would give us all a lot more confidence about the speed of the traffic that could be hitting our village. And I am quite aware that once this is open and we start complaining, it will be brushed under the carpet. So it would be really nice if we could get some upfront confirmation. You will check the speed of this traffic coming into the village based on the angle of that bridge coming into our village, please.
We told you this long ago when all these negotiations began. We told everybody how concerned we were with the speed of the traffic. Lorries, yes, but the speed of the traffic is horrendous now. I agree with you. I've got no confidence that it's going to slow down. What are you going to do to help us? And also, a long time ago, one of the meetings we had with the people designing the road said, we know that Hilton is the one who's going to lose the most. It's not good enough. It is not good enough.
The highway's been designed to current modern-day standards.
Yes, but with no regard to the fact that we are a rural village. Don't forget that. It's only a B road.
I understand
only a B road.
But the speed with which the traffic uses that highway is in some ways divorced from the design specification that you have to design to. So the two things aren't really aligned. If there is a speeding problem in Hilton, and I don't know Hilton very well as a village, I'm
Well,
not
it's a
from
pity
here,
you haven't been, because it's horrendous.
but that problem is in some ways not linked to the design. The design meets a specification, and that if there is a speeding problem, that's slightly different.
I fully
to the
understand the design, and that's what I opened the second part of my comment. Is I see exactly what you're doing. You're building exactly as you need to build it.
Yeah.
Our concern is because instead of having a flat road with a bend coming into our village, we are now going to have a bridge that is quite a good angle. I mean, not much around. I think it's going to be fun going down there. But it's going to then, there isn't really much of a bend, or I don't think there's really going to be any bend, before you hit the 30 mile an hour speed limit. And my concern is if you don't agree to try and monitor it from the day you open it, we're not going to get any assistance from you guys monitoring it, because you will then say it's a highway, go to the police. So
I
please, could you do something?
So to answer your question in a couple of parts, so you asked whether we can commit to putting some sort of speed monitoring device on there.
Just for a couple of months of when it's first open?
I'm afraid I can't commit to that. It's not a case of doing it for Hilton or not doing it for Hilton. We have to treat every community that we deal with, not just on this scheme, but throughout the country. So Highways England operates roads the width and breadth of the country. I can't commit to doing that for Hilton, because then we'd have to do that for every road in the country, and that starts getting difficult to manage.
With respect, that can't be correct. You know, we're talking here about a specific aspect of a road and how it's being changed by your design. It's not the same as any other road going into any other village. It's not the same as the road that currently comes into the village. So I don't think any of us would accept what you just said.
It's not too dissimilar to all the points we've raised about our fear over increased noise. You do a pre-build survey of the noise levels, and then you do a post. So you do monitor the sound level after the road is built to compare it with your predictions and with the sound levels that have been agreed to. So there's a bit of precedence there saying the effect on our village from noise is the same as our effect on the village from traffic, and you are doing post-construction monitoring, so why can't you do post-construction monitoring for speed?
So we are doing traffic. I think, so there's the design element that we're responsible for. I know this is going to sound like I'm pushing it off to others. Highways England have no enforcement powers. So if what you're saying, if there's an issue with speeding through Hilton at present, that means that the S-curve effectively that comes out of Hilton on Potton Road, the speeding through the village is not constrained by the road design as it is at present. So if you've got a speeding issue at the moment, I understand your concerns, and I can see where you're coming from in terms of having concerns that you foresee that the design of the road or the new build of the road will, in your view, help facilitate people speeding.
I think I'm not discussing the speeding that's happening at the moment. That is not what we're discussing. What we are discussing is the fact that the angle of your bridge and the straightness of the road going into our village is going to encourage people to put their foot down. We must all think about it. If you're going up the top of a bridge and you see a great big straight road going back down again, what do you do normally? You put your foot down because it's fun.
It's like coming down a hill on a bike.
You know, and you haven't made any, you haven't done anything to try and tell people when they're at the top of this bridge coming down towards Hilton, no guys, don't dump your foot down because there's a bend or there's a roundabout or there's something to stop that absolute direct angle where people are going to put their foot down. So there does need to be some sort of monitoring there of before and after. Not the monitoring of what's going into the village, but the speed of the cars of when they finish your bit of bridge, and then they start before you actually get to the village, the last bit of this old straight road. And
the design of, somebody said signage, the design of the signage is specified for us. So how you go from a national speed limit down to a 30 is all defined in various specifications of how you step people's speed down. You're talking about putting in some sort of speed reduction measures like chicanes and humps and all that sort of stuff. You can't really design that into this sort of environment.
But I mean, when this is opened in June, I wonder if there's going to be a few smashes there as well, because you are really encouraging people to put their foot down.
So
I mean, seriously, you are.
The control measure is the speed limit. And if there's any,
In fact, do you often obey the speed limit?
In
No,
30 zones I
precisely.
do.
well,
In 30 zones, coming into village, absolutely, hand on heart. I do every
Yeah,
time.
but
Because
this
they're 30 for a
isn't
reason.
coming into the village, this is going down and then blasting along. And then hitting the village.
What would you do in 12 months' time if it was reported that there were speeding issues on this bridge?
I can give you some examples of things that I may do, because engineering is not a yes you do this or no you don't do anything. There are, depending on what the problem looks like, depends on the solution. So if there is an issue with speeding, with near misses, with actual crashes or incidents, it could be speed cameras, although that's up to Cambridgeshire Constabulary as the authority to request that, although we will help them facilitate that. It could be some sort of traffic calming measure.
As an example?
It could be, it depends. What you don't want to do is stop people or slow them down completely. So Dave was talking about signage and transition from a national speed limit into a 30. What we try and do is step people down so that you don't go from 60 and having people slam on the brakes when they get to the 30, because that causes problems in and of itself.
But that's what they're going to be made to do at the moment with the way the bridge is and with the signage that's going to go there. You are going to go from 60 down a hill to a 30.
But they don't stop. So if you have, another one you do see sometimes, islands with one-way systems, so it tends to be one way out of the village and then the people coming into the village
So why
have to
can't
stop
we do
and
that?
Because that's what I'm saying. What we don't want is to create a pinch point where there are no alternatives for people to go. This is all hypothetical, and until we see the situation on the ground, I can't say we're going to do this or we're going to do this or we're going to do this, because actually what we want is the right solution, the correct solution to address any problems in the future,
But I think
not just a solution.
I think the point Sarah's made, one of the points Sarah's made, is asking you to monitor the speed, because like you're doing with sound, and also you're going to do the same with volumes of traffic, and this is all part of the modelling, is you've assured us that there won't be an increase in volume of traffic, there won't be an increase in noise. Then this is really the same thing, and you're going to measure and monitor both of those effects, the pre and post. What's different about measuring the pre and post speeding issue?
So we do monitor it. We don't monitor speed of individual vehicles. So what we monitor, so that all highways authorities monitor incidents or near misses. So if there's an incident that's either reported to the police or reported to the highways authority, or a near miss that's reported to those same, that goes onto a system, and what they do is look for trends. So we don't monitor the speeds, but what we do monitor is the impact on the road in terms of either accidents, near misses, incidents of that nature, and that will give us, that will tell us whether there's an issue or not.
So you wait for the accidents to happen before you
Yes,
take
that's
action.
just what I was thinking. Isn't modern design meant to be to stop accidents, not to create them?
It is, and in part that's why
So why can't we?
and in part that's why we've taken that S out. So you won't find on a modern road a road that replicates the design that you've got already.
To add to Karen's points, we get a lot of lorries coming through, the HGV lorries. There's no guarantee they'll stop, because they like this road. It's nice slipping down towards Biggleswade and the A1 and so on. So that's another big risk up on that very, very high bridge.
Those lorries chugging down there,
Yeah.
you know what lorries are like. You are very aware what lorries are like, especially double lorries with trailers on the back, like Marshalls.
And it's,
They do their 60 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour down there with that steep hill. If something happens, they will not stop, because
Added
not
to
only
that-
have they got the speed, they've got the momentum of the hill.
added to that, we have a night ban from 11 to 7, and it's defied every single weeknight. I live right on that road, I hear them. Okay, we're supposed to be able to take a note of who they are and what their registrations are, but you can't get out of there quick enough to get
I don't think that's to do with
So
violence.
that-
That's
There's
nothing
lots
to
of,
do
there's
with
lots
it.
of issues existing, and
Yeah,
No,
and
we
this
are
is, this is
talking
the
about-
point that
we are
needs to
talking
be
about
sorted now, not
What
later
is
on.
happening with the new road, not the issues that we currently have with the old
I
road.
think you've got a
New bridge.
you've got a responsibility to look at the effect the new road is having on the current status. I've said it 3 times now. You're doing it with noise, you're going to do it with traffic volumes. Why not do it with speed? Because all we're saying is your road could, or may not, we'll see from the stats if you do the monitoring, have an increase on the speed of traffic coming down that hill and into the village. So what we're saying there is why not monitor that pre and post in the same way you're doing for noise and you're doing for traffic volumes. Is that too much to ask for? Because it's your road that wouldn't have happened if the road hadn't been built.
Rather than letting us having to scrape up a young 18-year-old that smashed himself to pieces at the bottom of your road, then it's one of your statistics which you will then put on a grid. That's what we don't want.
No, and neither do I.
So could you please monitor it? And then you, if it's bad, you will then be able to alter it before anyone gets hurt, before we scrape a child up off the road.
I understand that this is an important issue to you.
Yes.
I think for the benefit of others that may have questions, can I suggest that we either talk to you after we're done?
No, because I think the rest of the village would like to know
That's fine.
what, are you able, yes or no, are you able to do anything at all? And if you aren't, where can we go to find someone that can?
I can't commit to that here.
Right, so where
Okay.
can we talk
So
to someone
what I
who
would suggest
can?
then is what I will do is I will ask our designers, our project director to have a look into this for you. And I would also suggest that you contact your your councillors and Cambridgeshire County Council. That's what I thought.
That's Ian.
Miss Wetzel and Cambridgeshire County Council as the local authority.
Can I ask you a quick question on the bridge? When it's opened in June, will it continue, will it have 40-mile-an-hour speed limit on it whilst construction goes on around? Like at the Wood Green, there's a 40-mile-an-hour speed restriction through there, through that structure road. Will that be on that bridge following it being opened?
no, our current plan is that the reason we keep the restriction on the 1198 is because it's incomplete. Our plan for this one is to actually remove all of the traffic management altogether. So A1198 is slightly different in as much as it's within the construction sequence to part build it, which allows us to move the traffic, which allows us to get to the material that's sat behind it. This one's slightly different in as much as we want to get underneath it, but that's we don't want to go back there. We want to finish it. We want to put TM back out on it. We want to get all the road signs, all of it on, and then take all the TM off, and then that's it. Finished. Work's finished. So ultimately, no.
Another quick question. Will you be taking up the tarmac of the old road when the new one has been put in place? Will that be retained as a gated area or something?
It depends on which one you're talking about. Some of them, so Potton Road, for example, a significant amount of that stays in and gets converted into landowner access, farmer access. Other sections of it get taken up in its entirety. It depends on which side road we're talking about. If it's not needed, we'll take it up almost straight away. If it remains part of the works, then it'll stay in and get gated.
Okay.
Where they're converted to farm access as well, they will be gated, so you won't have any concerns.
Right. That's fine. We don't want people parking there,
Yeah.
caravans and the like, do we?
Can I ask about the... Sorry, I was just going to say, just in regards to that, so I emailed Joe last week or so, hello. Hi. It's regarding HGVs, and we do have a problem in the village, and I know it's not your problem, but I see the new May 14 as an opportunity for us to bypass the village so that HGVs could use the new road as a potential bypass. And therefore, brings on to the point about the road that's currently there. Is there any scope to be able to use those as slip roads, just one on, going west, and one off, going east or north, so that these large vehicles could potentially get on there can get off at the 1198, bypassing the village altogether. Therefore, the village itself will be completely traffic calm.
I think unfortunately we're too far through the process to change the design.
It's not changing the design though, it's incorporating 2 new slip roads.
It will be so. Within the development consent order, we have what is called the red line boundary. The red line boundary dictates where we can build.
Why is that?
So it's essentially to provide assurance to communities, landowners, people like that, that what we are building or what we propose that we build is what we actually build.
Mm-hmm.
So when we wind back a couple of years, so in 2014 we went through what is called our pre-application consultation. So that was the consultation. We came out to lots of the villages. We had lots of events where we showed people what we were proposing to build and received their comments on that. That then formed the basis of effectively our planning application.
I actually put that in the consultation.
Yep. And so there are not everything that went into the consultation got into the final design.
We really tried to ask, could we have a ban of lorries through this village whilst you're doing the A14 during the whole of that consultation process? We didn't hear one word. Not one. Lots of lip service. Pardon? Yeah, sorry, I'm really supporting you on this.
No.
Yep. So we'll come back to the HGV ban. So in the same way, so you mentioned earlier that you've got a planning application that's going in for the pavilion. So what we have to do is largely the same process as what you or I would do if you wanted to extend your home. You have to say to the planning authority, this is what I want to build. The planning authority then says, yes, that's what you can build, or yes, you can build it if you make these changes, or no, you can't build it at all. The red line sets out what we can and what we can't build. The red line also gives us our compulsory purchase powers, so where we have to compulsory purchase land off landowners to build the scheme. Obviously, there is no A14 in the location that we're building it now, so we needed powers to purchase that land so that we could build it. We have those powers now. We can't change what we're doing.
Ian, can it be changed? What can be done?
I think what you're trying to explain actually is that if you build a house, you know where your boundaries are.
Mm.
And it's the same type of process. There are this boundary, that boundary, and what they can't do is step outside the boundary which was approved back in 2014. The same issue, by the way, I've gone through that in other parts around Girton, okay, and essentially what it is there's a line on the map, they can build in the line, but they can't build over the line, and all that really was back in 14 when all that discussion took place and where the lines were drawn across the whole route.
But can't apply for...
Not
can't
as a part
apply
of the
for...
scheme.
I'm sitting here thinking about, and again, I don't fully understand all the wagon movements around here, because obviously you are
There's a lot of them.
seeing that you're blighted by them, but
So if you're coming from St Ives,
Yeah.
so you go over the bridge,
yeah,
HGVs could then turn right to get on the slip road. Not just HGVs, it would probably be anything, but could get on to the new 14 to go up to the 1198, to go down the 1198 to rejoin.
yeah.
Will they get back onto the 1198? And then come in.
But don't you run the risk that the more openings you've got onto the new A14, the more you're going to be used as a rattler to get onto the A14 if you keep all the access?
Yes, that is a concern, but the village could then be traffic calm. It makes it less attractive. And also, we've been told that this won't, we're going to be less of a rat run because people won't need to come through Hilton to go into Cambridge. Because that will be where a lot of traffic is actually in the morning. People going to Cambridge. I know, because I used to do it myself.
Won't the new A14 be quicker?
Yeah, that's
what I'm saying. I hope so.
Right.
The idea is that when the new road is built, there'll be less reason for the lorries
People to
and
come
people
through.
to use the local
Well, no,
villages.
lorries still will. Because it's a route that they take to get to where they're going. But I don't see the lorries changing at all.
Because there's a slip at the 1198 for them to come off one way and on one way. So what you're suggesting of here, there is that slip at the 1198, which is obviously only just slightly down.
It will be on the B1040. There'll be a slip on and a slip off.
I can tell you quite categorically that probably 90% of the HGVs are going towards Papworth, the other 10% are coming the other way, that's day and night.
And they're doing it
I can
because they
promise
have to
you
get
that.
to, is it Bickles Road most of them go?
Mm.
Yeah. They will always use that route.
Yeah.
This is going to have no effect on HGVs whatsoever.
Yeah.
There's very little we can do. I mean, we can't change the design at this time. As we just pointed out, we can't add things that aren't already in the design. And with regards to HGV problem, it's something again that we have to.
Yeah, no, we know we have to take that up elsewhere, but this was about whether or not it's alleviated
we can do
by
on
using the
the
road.
design.
Last question. It's very frustrating to hear that, because equally there's nothing we could do during the consultation period. Everything we asked seemed to be ignored. And now you're sitting here saying that, sorry, it's too late to change it. So I'd like to know, if your modelling turns out to be incorrect, for example, air pollution or noise, what recourse do we have to come against you to get something changed?
So there's three parts to that question, and they're slightly different. So as part of the DCO, we have requirements, which are the same as planning conditions that you would have again for any kind of build that you have. We have a requirement to monitor traffic flows, both. I think back now. I think 1 year after opening and 5 years after opening. If those traffic flows are materially different to what our model forecasts that they would be, we will work with Cambridge County Council as the Highways Authority to agree and implement appropriate traffic mitigation, whatever that looks like. And again, it depends on what the problem is, depends on what the solution may be. But it could be HGV bans on certain roads, it could be traffic calming, it could be things like that. So that's around the traffic. Around the air quality, I have to caveat this because at the time when we went through our DCO examination, we were part of the European Union. Obviously, when that changes next year, things may change. At the time when we went through the development consent order, all countries within the EU had what they call relevant limit values. So they monitor different kinds of pollution, and they had different values for each of those different types of pollution that were deemed by air quality experts to be in exceedance and starting to impact on human health. We will monitor the air quality throughout the trace of the scheme, and if any of our air quality monitoring stations show that there is an exceedance of those limit values, we have to work with the local planning authority, whether that's South Cambs or Hunts District, to again agree and implement changes to air quality or changes to reduce that air quality down to below the level of that relevant limit value, whichever one is exceeded. Like I say, depending on how the changes to Brexit impact on what we look at, we'll have to revisit that with the local authorities. But I would imagine that that as a country out of the European Union, we will probably stick to the same limit values because they're largely recognised by air quality experts to be the levels at which human health is impacted. Air quality is more difficult to change locally. We rely quite heavily on improvements based on technology, but there are other options. So generally speaking, reducing speed limits does tend to have a positive impact on air quality. So depending on where the pollutants are coming from, whether that's locally or whether that's on the A14, that's probably what that would look like. And then in terms of noise, we had a correction order. So at the time of the development consent order examination, South Cambs District Council had concerns, didn't have concerns. They wanted to ensure that our noise modelling on the ground when we were done, largely reflected what we were saying it was going to do. Our noise models are derived from traffic models. So what we do is we build the traffic model. The traffic model tells us how many cars and how many lorries or heavy goods vehicles are going to be passing, and the speeds that they'll be doing. We then use that traffic model to build ourselves a noise model. So what we'll do post-construction is we monitor the traffic levels, and again, if those traffic levels are materially different to what our traffic model said, we then have to redo our noise model based on the actual traffic levels that we see out on the ground. Does that make sense? Do you follow me there?
Yeah, it still doesn't answer the question.
Yeah. So that's how we understand whether there's a issue or not.
It was all covered, okay, before, 1 year later and 5 years later, and when you've actually reached that sort of point, when they know what the traffic volume was, it was all put down. We saw most of it, as you saw most of it. And so it's a year's time when you can start to ask the questions, what was it, what's it now, what was it before, and then you're into the discussion, and there is money available to, there's money put in the budget to cater for that.
Thank you. My question is, what recourse do we have against you to make you do something? So, do you have to do something?
Yes, we do.
You do. You're obliged to do something.
So the requirement is the same as a
That's
condition.
what I'm asking.
Yes. So it's a legal requirement.
It's a legal
so
requirement.
if we don't do it, the local planning authority has enforcement powers on us as a body.
Can I also ask then, for pollution and for noise, for Hilton, where are the monitors?
Sorry to interrupt you, Sarah.
No.
This is the problem with this. That there aren't monitors. What they do is they measure the traffic flow and extrapolate a noise figure from the amount of traffic. They don't actually measure the noise. So we have to believe that their predictions and their extrapolations are correct. And we had a big argument, remember, the argument with our noise expert that said, actually, we think your figures are wrong. But what they're saying is they'll just measure the traffic flow, say 1,000 cars an hour, and I'll extrapolate into a certain level of noise. What they're saying, if there's more cars than that, than they predict the noise will be higher. They don't actually measure it. If it's significantly greater, then they will have to come and measure. But I'm not sure they've got a base level apart from the fact that they're just measuring the number of cars. Is that correct?
Forgive me, Andy, I thought you said there were air pollution...
There's one air pollution monitor
in monitors.
And is there one around the Hilton area? So Hilton...
Where's the nearest one to Hilton?
Yes.
I think there is one in Hilton.
There is, it's in Chequers Croft.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Okay. Which is a shame because they moved it away from the main B1040, right into the middle of the village, in the middle of nowhere where there's not much traffic. But the point of theirs is that they're measuring the amount of pollution from the A14, not the potential increase in pollution that increased traffic might cause going through the village. So they're measuring for two different reasons. Theirs is to measure the pollution the A14 might cause directly on the village, and that's why they've stuck it in the middle of Chequers Croft, because it's...
Sorry, can I just make this point very quickly?
You have answered my question, thank you.
That's okay. We do not choose the locations. That is down to the local planning authority who act on behalf of the residents.
Well, I don't think so.
No.
I tell you,
sorry, that's down to the local planning authority.
It was outside my house, and it disappeared one day. When I investigated where it had gone, they'd moved it halfway across the village into Chequers Croft.
So we work with the local planning authority to agree the locations.
Huntingdon Planning.
So,
can I just ask one straightforward question? Does Highways England have the equipment to measure speed? Do you have the equipment to measure speed? I'm quite happy for you to take away and give me an answer to that outside.
I can give you an answer to that question.
Yeah.
I'm not Highways England for the contractor, but I can give you the answer to the question is that it isn't so much do we hold the equipment to measure speed, it's can we get hold of the equipment to measure speed.
Yeah.
And that there are suppliers out there who will install that for us. Absolutely. As a contractor, you know, when you go on a smart motorways program with all the big yellow signs that say camera not in use, that's a speed camera.
Yes,
so yeah, suppliers are out there to provide the ability to measure speed, absolutely.
And so to back up what Dave says, so Highways England don't hold the equipment, we don't have it in the warehouse, we have a supply chain that we provide it for.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Next question, yeah. Do you think the A14 project will be a winner in the BBC's Country File competition for conservation?
Well said.
So I think we know who the winner is.
Well, I don't care.
Do you think
it could be the A14 project for conservation when you've ripped up thousands of trees, arable land has disappeared, and it looks like, I drove up the A14 from Cambridge just now, it's like Al Alamein.
I think it's difficult to see from a local point of view on what it is right now as to what we're actually doing with the environment. So yeah, we have taken out a lot of trees because we can't physically build a road without taking those trees up. But for every tree we take down, is it 2 that we put back up? So we replant. Highways England are the biggest planter in the country of trees. As well as that, the work that we're doing with water voles and other protected species is what we're being recognised on that award for. We don't know if we'll win it, but we have been nominated for it.
And I'm not going to be popular here. I know I'm not going to be popular. We are doing some great pieces of work from a conservation point of view. I'm aware that we have taken down a lot of trees. I'm aware that it looked disruptive. It is disruptive. We can't get away from that. We can't build a new road. You can't build any developments without impacting on the environment that is already there. However, it's not as simple as saying you've taken trees out and therefore that's bad. So heavily farmed agricultural land tends not to be high in biodiversity. What we term ecological mitigation areas, so where we build new habitat for the species that we displace, it greatly increases the biodiversity in the region. And that's a good thing, because what it means is that you don't get a single species that is completely dominant and wipes out the local population of other species. So you see that a lot, where you get things like white-clawed crayfish, or where you get Japanese knotweed, or where you get other invasive species. I think, if you've an interest in nature conservation, you recognise that not having a diverse range of both flora and fauna is not good for the environment, because weaker species will get wiped out. So I think we've done some really good work. It may not look that way, and I understand why it may not look that way. But yes, I think that we've done some really good stuff. I'm not saying that this is the end of road building and the improvements that it can have to the environment, but if you're a baby, you don't go from nothing to running 100 metres in the Olympics. There has to be step changes along the way, and that's part of what Highways England has been created to do, to give us some of that freedom to do some of those sorts of things.
I think what is a great shame is that there's a vast acreage of quality farming land has been lost to concrete. I come from a farming background, and it just is grieving. I mean, do you know how many acres you've taken away?
Not off the top of my head, but I can find out.
It would be nice to know. I mean, it's a tragedy. This is a known area in East Anglia for absolute quality farming land.
At the same time, it's a known area for congestion. You can't get away from the
I
fact
know that, but
these are significant pieces of infrastructure have put significant strains on the environment. We do know that, but I can say I've been road building for 20 years, and I see more effort and energy put into environmental mitigation here than I have on any other scheme previously. And I don't understand all the models that the really clever people do. But you can bet your bottom dollar that the big benefit to the environment from the new A14 will be the reduction in emissions that the whole area will see.
We'll wait and see.
It happens on every scheme.
That's bound to be temporary, because every study that's looked at of new motorways and so on being built ends up saying it's fine for a small number of years until it all fills up with traffic and then you're back to where you started. I'd really much rather Highways England put their effort into reducing people using vehicles of any sort, but of course that doesn't happen.
Well, I think
UK PLC is also working on a myriad of other things, green technology, battery technology, tuning vehicles, all that sort of stuff. So The future is
But
getting
all the
there.
money that went into this scheme, for example, went into some of those other schemes, we might all end up in a better place. However, we are where we are. Can I ask a yes/no question? Should I ask? Is there yet a map of the new bits of the 1040 that shows very clearly where it will stop when it hits the current?
I mean, where it'll join the
Yes,
existing road?
yes,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
so, and is that on your website? Can I get hold of a copy?
It's probably a little bit more detailed than that. The drawings on the website are very much general arrangement drawings.
Or can we get
But
a
yeah, there's no
detailed
reason we
one?
can't send that over to
Please.
Joe for you to have a look
That
at.
would be very helpful because we're looking to get a cycle path built. So my second question, will your cycle path, which I believe will be on the new bit of the 1040, which side is it going to be on? Because that makes a big difference to what we'll be able to afford to do.
I should be the person to answer that question, and I'm going to say at the moment I don't know. I think
Yeah,
Can you tell us? We've
As
asked
you're
the
going out of
question
Hilton,
once
it's on the
ago.
left-hand
it's
side.
on the west hand
It is,
side.
yeah.
It's the left hand side.
Yeah, the opposite
And
side,
it should-
the opposite side to the path, the current
But
path.
can it be
It
moved?
can't be shifted. There's something called the Statement of Common Ground, which is a commitment that was done at the DCO, and I believe it's the County Council.
Yeah, so Cambridge County Council asked us to put the footpath on the west side of the highway.
And we are legally bound to do what's in the Statement of Common Ground.
Okay.
Have you just agreed, Ian, that
That was back
Cambridge
in 2014, that was ages ago.
2014?
Most of all this you're talking about goes back to
It's
the
a waste of
development consent
£9,500,
okay,
isn't it?
about the lines
Sorry,
and things like that.
I'm confused then. Is it Cambridge County Council that said put it on that side?
Yes.
So there's nothing to do with Highlands England?
Well, no, they come to Huntington District Council about issues about monitoring the environment, issues about air quality, etc. So they work with the local councils, both county and district, and therefore they communicate about, well, what about, what if, what would you like, etc. But all that goes back to 14.
So do we know why that side was chosen when the footpath's on the other side?
Exactly.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
So the footpath going out of Hilton is obviously on the east side of the road.
Yeah.
It stops at about that point. You've got the bridleway that comes kind of from the northwest,
Yeah.
that comes on the west hand side. So my understanding, this was a long time ago, is that the preference from Cambridge County was to have the footpath on the side that horses would join, so that horses or equestrians, horses and riders didn't have to cross the road. I think,
Shame about pedestrians.
and again, I think that there is a wider piece of work, and Cambridgeshire have aspirations to improve the footpaths in and out of Hilton, and when you look particularly to the north, it makes more sense if you're doing improvements for the footpath to be on the west side because the verge is wider. So that's my understanding.
Can we talk about a very current problem, which is construction traffic in the village? A lot of us see them every day. We go out walking dogs. At least one of our villagers has taken it on herself to stop anyone that she sees. And a lot of the drivers say, oh, we didn't know anything about that. So it's, and you know, now we've been going at this for whatever it is, 18 months, and really not very much has changed. So
I would agree with that point a month ago.
Just to give you a bit of background, Graham and I met with the A14 delivery team a few weeks back to discuss that as one of the matters, and I have actually now got minutes that I've distributed to the council, but obviously they haven't come to a meeting yet, to explain why that was happening and what they've put in force now to hopefully stop that. And I think actually, well, I've certainly seen an improvement over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, if you're still seeing vehicles, please let me know, because then I can report it. But
yeah, no, well, I was away last night. I mean, one of the ones, and it may be because there's no option, is the Lynch Road cleaner.
The Lynch Road sweeper is because there's no option, so they come across the plant crossings to keep that clean, and they can't turn around in the middle of the road, so they have to come in to turn around.
Right, I did actually see them go through the village on this road.
They do Hilton and Bottom Road,
Right.
so potentially that could be why they're doing that. So that's one unfortunately we can't avoid. But the rest of them, I mean, like I said, walk the dogs. I've not noticed any for the last few weeks. I'm on the lookout for them.
And like I say, we have got more control measures in place, so we are hoping that we have got the situation under control. We think we have, but if that's something that you're not seeing, please raise it, and we'll go back to putting more control measures in place.
So I now get a daily report. So we've set up on our tracking system. So it's only for the sort of the A14 specific vehicles. There's a tracking system, and I get now a report when somebody comes into that. We've put Hilton down as a point of interest, and I get a report when that happens, and it hasn't happened.
Can I ask why has it taken 18 months? I have taken more photographs than my phone has ever taken in its life and passed it to Joe. Joe, I know, has passed them on to you, Joe. I have stopped vehicles. They have been incredibly rude, and they've called the police on me, and the police wouldn't come, coming through the village. Why has it taken 18 months? Can you give us a really good reason for that, please? When we've reported it day in, day out.
There's been some confusion. The honest answer is that there was confusing communication sent to the workforce about what was permissible and what wasn't permissible. That has now been resolved. We've told them exactly what's permissible and not permissible, and that briefing goes out on a regular basis to all the contractors that we've currently got and all the new contractors that we will have starting. With that ambiguity gone, especially you'll see it rise in the bad weather as people, because effectively the first port of call is down through the works, second port of call is the A14, and what's happened is when the weather gets bad and the A14 gets clogged, everybody comes this way. So the short and sweet answer is there was poor communication between us and our supply chain.
So Jade has got absolutely no voice at all, and nobody ever listens to her. Is that correct?
No, it's not. It's not.
Well, it took
correct.
18 months
But
of us nagging at you, Jade,
Yeah.
and you not getting anywhere.
Well, no, but it isn't. It's unfortunately it's human behaviour, and that is the long and short of it. You can. It's because it's not a legal requirement. Yeah, it is persuasion and it is explaining. We've now put enforcement in place, hence the tracking, and people are now being removed from site and they're not allowed to drive the site. Their site vehicle permit gets taken off them. So it's taken that drastic measure in order to stop it.
That's what you told us 18 months ago you were going to do. Thank you, Jade.
And that's what the question is, has it reduced? Have you seen a reduction?
Yes, it has, since one of our parishioners actually got involved when you were on holiday, Jade, and got involved with some higher bosses. And that's when it seemed to change.
That's
No
not
comment.
that's not my comment. That's not my recollection of what's happened.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Thank you. Just one last question for me, if I may. Is the overall project on time, running on time? Will it open in 2020?
yeah, 2020 is
Because that's 12 months.
not an issue.
Yeah.
No, we've come through a particularly drawn-out winter. So I'd say that November and December were very kind to us. January, February, March, April weren't so kind to us. But generally across the patch, each of the sections has got their own separate completion dates. But the December 2020 is the project's still on track.
Peter, can I ask one last question?
If you would like.
Thank you. Thank you for bearing with me. So one thing I noticed when I drive around Hilton is how all the roads on the edges have been widened by all the traffic. And thank you very much. You've recently done some work on Church End, I think, to repair the damage that was there.
No, we haven't.
No?
No, that was my request.
Okay.
So I think it was actually agreed that a lot of that damage was down to some local works that have been going on with Cambridgeshire Council.
Okay, thank you. My point being, my question is, these roads are now wide than they were before. Part of the charm of this village was the narrow roads with the grass verges. So the solution seems to be to widen the road when repairing it. And presumably you will repair the roads at some point. What steps can you take to bring it back to the nice rural grass verges, narrow lanes that were there before?
Come come and do a survey. Come and do a survey of the damage that's been caused to the vergers along Gravely Way.
That's a good example.
And see, let us know what we can do about it.
I'm more than happy, I can happily sign up to doing that, that's no problem.
Yes, as I came tonight, a huge thing with ladders and goodness knows what on it was actually going down Gravely Way. I don't know whether it got past the one-way thing or demolished it. Some ductors there it was connected. Unfortunately, I was going the other way, so I didn't have any way of recording a number plate or anything.
I'd be a little bit worried if somebody turns up to our job with ladders.
Well, no, it's lattice on the back of
Oh,
it.
right, okay, sorry, mine.
May I just ask one really silly little question? Bring it right down to a very low level. Along the Bottom Road outside the Methodist Church, permanently displayed is diversion ends. And then you drive past and then it says road ahead closed. And this sign is now actually rusted into place because I did try to move it. It must be very confusing.
Yeah, I'll get the traffic management team to have a look at that.
Thank you.
And as you know, we had absolute chaos again at the weekend because although we were assured in the meeting we had together,
Was it the same diversion?
it was, and they cocked up again, and
So
we
they
had
hadn't put the same sign
they
up?
hadn't put them down at
Has
Papworth.
Sam come back to you?
No.
Okay, I'll have to.
And the problem, of course, was we had the A1 closed and you had the A14 closed the same weekend.
Yeah.
Everybody hit Papworth. There was no sign there to say that the road was closed. Everybody came into the village. So what do they have to do? I mean, we made it so clear.
Yeah. Well, I thought we'd got there, but I'll have a chat with Sam tomorrow about that.
Yeah.
I thought he'd have come back to you, but
No, he's on holiday.
I was speaking of
But I did copy his out of office colleagues on it, but just.
No, I'll chase up on that.
And as we can, obviously, you said we're going to have the road closed again 2 or 3 times in the next month or so because of the flyover changes. It's so important that people don't get off at Papworth.
We'd agreed the sign changes.
We did.
So I'm not sure what went wrong this week.
No,
so
I
I'll have a
don't.
chat
The ones
with
in the
Sam.
village were fine. It was
Yeah.
at Papworth, which meant everybody piled into the village.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. But I've got one question. One last question.
That's for me, is it?
Yeah.
You've obviously got traffic management contacts, haven't you? We sometimes close the road, or we used to close the road across here. We're now told it's a very difficult process where we have to send people on a training course, costs us money. Wondering whether you could help us with your contacts to help us close the road for about 4 or 5 days in summer. We have to send people on a course now.
Individual days or?
Well, you can see so.
Oh, right, is this for sort of events?
It's for the things,
Right,
so
okay,
it's charity
yeah.
events.
Yeah.
Previously, we
If
just
you
used to put
can-
signs up what's happening. Now
If
there's
you
a...
can send me the details over, I'll look into what we can
Okay,
do.
good, thank you.
It won't be a problem. I'm
Yeah.
sure we can sort that out. We've got
Amazon, you know.
traffic managers, guys. It's not a difficult job for us to assist you guys in doing that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much.
Right, Ken. Watch. If you wouldn't mind. Oh, no. Ken, can I give us an update on Neighbourhood Watch? Ken?
My name is Ken Harris and I coordinate the Neighbourhood Watch activity in the village. If you have been away, you've been driving in and out of the village, you may have noticed the signs. You're probably aware that a Neighbourhood Watch scheme has existed in Hilton for several years now. I don't know how many, it's been some significant length of time. It aims to improve security awareness in the village and to foster good communications between residents and the police. By improving security awareness, it is hoped that the scheme will allay undue fear of crime or antisocial behaviour. That's where we've been. For the purpose of the Neighbourhood Watch, Hilton is subdivided into 16 areas. In each area, a coordinator is registered with the police to receive alert messages. For their part, Cambridge Police often issue an alert message. If a crime is reported or suspected in the vicinity. These include burglaries, criminal damage, or antisocial behaviour. There's always a chance that the alert message will stimulate residents to contribute what turns out to be useful information. We did have a situation where a suspicion was reported around by the neighbourhood watch in the village, and the whole storm was cleared within a matter of hours because people around the village were able to contribute useful information. Now, as distinct from these alert messages, Action Fraud is the National Reporting Centre for fraud and cybercrime. It's operated by the City of London Police, who distribute action fraud messages to warn of reported internet scams, phishing texts, and email frauds. The messages offer basic advice on mitigating the associated risks, including the following. They advise you to register with the telephone preference service to minimise cold calls. They advise you to be wary of contacts that you did not personally instigate, whether they are phone calls, emails, or doorstep callers. They recommend that you use a separate telephone line when checking the bona fides of callers to avoid the possibility of telephone line capture. And they also advise that you do not click on internet links in unsolicited emails. Always manually type in the target URL that you're trying to reach. The Police and Crime Commissioner has issued alert messages to distribute his policy statements and associated reports. Alert messages have also been used to advertise job opportunities with the police and the Commissioner's offices. Now, some residents might find these alert messages useful, but they don't wish to involve themselves in the full neighbourhood watch. For these people, registering with ECOPS, a scheme that's operated by Cambridge Constabulary, will ensure that you receive alert messages. Simply follow the ECOPS link from the police website for more information on how to register that august body. Turning away from the immediate neighbourhood watch activities, looking a little more broadly, over the years, Neighbourhood Watch has developed its communications to deliver the security awareness functions that it aims for. The network, the communications network, has been developed to include fallback radio handsets. These are also available to support the village's emergency plan. When we had the foul weather, when we had the beast from the east, I think it was the jargon, we were charging up the batteries just to make sure that those radios would have worked if ever they had been needed. The neighbourhood watch apparatus can cascade messages from the emergency officer down to individual villagers and return feedback on any developing situations in a particular area. You will be aware, I think you will be aware, that the new General Data Protection Regulations come into effect on the 25th of May. The Neighbourhood Watch coordinators, the lists of Neighbourhood Watch members, names, addresses, and contact details constitute personal information and fall within the remit of the new regulations. At national level, Neighbourhood Watch, in close consultation with the Information Commissioner's Office, have developed and published guidance to remind individuals of their responsibilities. We have reassurance from the Information Commissioner's Office that there is no need to reaffirm the consent given by current members. Their data can be used for the purposes of communication and scheme administration. In future, this consent would need to be evidenced, as they term it, for new members joining the Neighbourhood Watch. Neighbourhood Watch recommends that members' data should be stored on secure networks. However, they do recognise that there's a real world out there somewhere, and that coordinators, members of the Neighbourhood Watch will continue to operate from sometimes penciled lists, and often by putting the data onto a memory stick that gets stuck in someone's back pocket. As far as security is concerned, and as far as compliance with these new regulations is concerned, the message is to minimise personal data that is held by the local coordinators. Make sure that you only have what is utterly essential to you. So, following on from last year's trend, we are, as ever, short of Neighbourhood Watch area coordinators. But Neighbourhood Watch remains an equal opportunities employer, so if you fancy a 0 hours contract helping to run Neighbourhood Watch in the area, then please call my number. It's in the parish magazine. Or maybe rat on a friend. There is, I think, I hope that I've given you the flavour that Neighbourhood Watch has been here for some significant length of time, and to say that the management has been benign neglect would perhaps be a bit cruel, but we do feel now that we should be looking to revitalise the Neighbourhood Watch in the village, and as with all good management practice, the first thing that we look for are the requirements definitions. If you think that there is a problem in the village that Neighbourhood Watch could or should contribute to resolving, then please put forward your ideas. Nothing is too outlandish. It'll be a steady process to refine and develop new objectives for a revitalised Neighbourhood Watch. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to address the meeting. Are there any questions?
Pleasure, Ken. Thank you as always. Okay, so next up, thank you very much, Ken, is Phil from the Town Trust. Good evening. A short report, you'll be pleased to know, on from the Town Trust. First of all, a little bit of background about how it's structured, just to give some relevance to the actual report about what's gone on during the course of the year. You may or may not know that as a village we benefit from land and assets that have been bequeathed over the centuries. This is then held by charity, and the most recent form of that was a deed that dates back to 1899. But there are essentially two charities. One which holds the land and assets that we have, and that then generates an income, and that income is then distributed according to the deeds, and it goes 50-50 to the parish church for use on the fabric of the building, and then the other 50% goes to what's called the town charity, and that is then used for general distribution for anything to do with the village, really, and it really is as broad as that. The trustees of these charities, David Busk is the chairman, our vicar, and then the Parish Council appoints two trustees who are currently, and just been reaffirmed, as Brian Ward and Rachel Lawton, and the church appoints the other two trustees, usually the church wardens, although as we only have one of those, so it's Rachel Wood and Nick Sarkis. And I'm the clerk. So, the town charity, the report for 2007, at the start of the year there was around £17,000 in hand. Income for the year was £5,000, which came in from the estate charity, plus some interest. Now, the trustees don't have a specific mandate of what to do with this, as long as it's, and it can be either for capital grants, educational grants, for grants to other charities or other organisations. The only caveat is it's for the needs of the village, in one form or another. Expenditure during 2017 was just over £6,000, so the net position at the end of 2017 was just over 16,000, and expected income in 2018 is 5,000. So there's 21,000 there for anyone who's done the maths quickly. But just to give you a feel for the projects that were supported during 2017, there was £2,000 go towards refurbishment here in the village hall. £1,000 went to the primary school to help with their outdoor play area. Two young people received individual grants. That came to £1,500 in total. One was for assistance with a placement at the National Youth Theatre. Another one was for development of their athletics abilities, essentially. There was a grant to the village, or the last part of the grant to the village AED project. There was support to the guides, to the dog show for their rosettes,
to the craft group for the display that's outside, for some of the materials for that, and then the Christmas hamper distribution as well. So just to give you a flavour for the sorts of things out there. The real point I would like to make though is the trustees are open to proposals from either from individuals or from community projects of any sort. It is a very wide brief. If anyone knows of anybody that needs some help or support from within the village, or there's bigger things going on, then the trustees are always happy to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. So any questions? All right, thank you very much. So now we have Cambridgeshire Council.
Hi, good evening. I think most of you. I was just saying that you may have the benefit actually of just leaving early. Okay, Cambridgeshire County Council, as I'm sure you appreciate, covers quite a considerable area. There are 61 councillors, all of the committees. There are numerous committees which include audit committees. For instance, we've heard about audit and accounts. We have audit and accounts committee as well. And there are children's services, health. Health comes within, public health that is, comes within Cambridgeshire County Council now. It's about education, it's about the environment, it's about highways. So all of those committees and all the reports are all on their website and are there for you to see and scrutinise if you so desire. What I was going to talk briefly about, bearing in mind the time, Peter, I will keep it short, is what's changed. What is changing actually is a greater emphasis on shared services. We now share a chief executive with Peterborough. We now share for children's service, adult services, learning disability services and education with Peterborough, and that direction of travel will continue. Quite simply, you save quite a bit of money if you can share a chief executive. Chief executives come at a cost, and therefore if you can divert that money from the shared services into frontline, then actually the benefit is to keep the front line going. So that's a trend which will continue. We did put up the council tax last year, as I'm sure you're aware, you've all got your bills, and that actually is essentially to protect vulnerable people. The majority of our services are dealing with vulnerable people and children. So as an example, it goes up and down, but on average there could be anything like 700 children who were requiring care. Those are children who will be taken in. A lot of them will go to foster parents, but some of them will go into more residential accommodation. That's 700, which goes up and down. That takes a lot of resource. That is a statutory service. It's not something we can say, well, we might do it today, but we won't do it tomorrow. It is a statutory service. We have to do it, and we will do it. Interesting, Peter talked about buses. That is not a statutory service. We do not have to provide any funds at all to support buses. The other change is we now have a combined authority within Cambridge and Peterborough, and they actually have the responsibility in the future for bus provision. So that actually is a change which will occur. At the moment, they actually have got it, and they've actually given it back to us at the moment, and that actually will continue until end of March, 1st of April next year, and obviously I don't know the outcome of that review. It also means that the people who've got concessionary bus fares, bus passes, and also goes to the combined authority, and they pass that back to us as well. At the moment, they are only fairly new, they're only in a year, it's only been in operation a year. All their information is on their website, you can read all about their sort of things. So they're dealing with things like housing, where the money went to support housing, transport, skills, etc. The one thing perhaps to get onto is the good old potholes, okay, which a lot of people do. Please report them online. It saves a lot of time, because if you report it online, it goes straight to the engineer. If you ring up or you do an email, that goes through a different system. So if you ring up, it goes to a contact centre. Contact centre then contact the engineer, who then actually, and that's actually maybe 5 days ago. So the more you can do online by reporting those potholes and the street lights, anything else that relates, do it online because it is far quicker and more cost effective for us. Other than that, Peter, I'll keep you just to that, and everybody got any questions, happy to answer.
I'll just make myself about fostering. Cambridge County Council would welcome anybody who's interested in fostering.
Yes, if you are, yes, okay, thank you for the problem. We are always keen to have more foster parents. It is absolutely the right thing to do. I know foster parents that do that, and they are very valued by Cambridge County Council for the work they do. It is hidden. People don't actually know who fosters. They don't actually know about those children. But if you know somebody, a relative, a friend, that you'll be interested, contact Cambridge County Council. It is far better. The outcome for the children is far, far better if they go into a foster situation than go into essentially a children's home. Okay, and you don't need to tell me to explain that better outcome. It's pretty obvious for most of us if they go in a homely environment. These people are very, very scarce. We don't have a lot of them, and we would like more of them. Thank you, Peter.
That's right, I just
and so anybody else? I will be staying at the end, so I can always pick it up at the end.
Thank you, Ian. David. This is David, recently elected as District Councillor for Penstanton.
Penstanton and hello everyone. I just thought I'd come along and say hello. I've only prepared speeches for this evening, you'll be pleased to hear. District Council 4 years, hopefully. As you know, District Council deal with planning, household waste, environmental health licensing and housing effectively. Any issues to do with any of those sort of things, feel free to contact me. Details are on the District Council website, but I'll forward them on to Joe as well, so they go on the Parish Council one as well. Happy to take any questions, but it's just to come here and say hello for my first visit really, so hopefully I'll see all you guys in the future as well. Yeah.
Sarah, you're going to give the floor is yours for pre-making spaces.
This is courtesy of Councillor Kieran Dunn has written this, so blame him if it's too long. Tree work. This season we managed to clear the tree work from the priority list A and priority list B at a cost to the parish of just under £2,500. We thinned out several trees from previous plantations, allowing others to spread naturally. Amongst other tasks, we lowered the crown of the large oak near the bakehouse and removed plenty of dead wood from trees all around the village. We also removed some trees next to the play park, which will hopefully allow more light to filter in. Most of this work was undertaken by 2 tree surgeons, with the remainder, most of which is from priority list C, allocated to the Open Spaces Volunteers Group. Due to the harsh conditions this winter, the volunteer group did not manage to complete the list before we bumped into the start of the nesting season in March. The remainder of this work will be completed in the late autumn, which means, all well-being, we should have cleared all items off our current list. The list is added to each year following inspections, and for the first time this year we will have had 2 rounds of tree inspections, one in late summer as usual and another early spring 2019. This is in line with our updated tree management policy. The volunteer group has also planted a number of new trees donated to us by HDC nurseries before they were closed down last year. The new planting is in 2 clusters. The first is south of the cricket field in front of Bonnet Farm along Rags Road. The second is in the northernmost corner of the wilderness. The trees are a mixture of oak, maple, hornbeam and service trees. The wet spring will have got them off to a good start. Our tree warden Ian has inspected them recently, and apart from one, they will look in good shape. We will continue to monitor. Grass cutting. The extremely cold and wet spring meant that the first cut of grass happened later than usual. Following an assessment last year of the success of the policy of returning as much of the green to hay meadow as possible, 2 areas were identified as not being too successful. The first, south of the church, where the ground lies particularly wet, and the second in front of Manor Farm, where the grass remains in shade from trees that the hay does not properly dry. Both these areas have now returned to the regular mowing scheme. It is worth noting we have just entered the last year of the 3-year green maintenance contract. The contract will be re-awarded again in April 2019. As this is one of the most significant financial commitments that the Parish Council undertakes, the Green Open Spaces Committee will endeavour again to achieve the arrangement for the parish. An element of the current contract that will hopefully be carried forward to the next is allocating a number of hours reserved for unspecified tasks, what we have called directed works. This has been a successful scheme offering the PC a level of flexibility in tackling one-off tasks. Earlier this year, the maze underwent a thorough recut, making sure that the curves of the grass pathways followed the original design. This is quite a technical and involves a number of templates which define the shape. Our great thanks to John Carter, who undertakes this work, and for all the good work he completed this year under the maintenance contract. As we did last year, the green in front of the pavilion was roped off when the ground became waterlogged. This is a favourite spot for joyriders to leave the road and spin around on the grass. Although the blue rope is not particularly attractive, it does appear to be a deterrent, and unless there is another proposal put forward to deter this activity, we will aim to do the same again next winter. Many will have noticed the significant level of degradation to some of the grass verges this winter, particularly at Bram's Pit along the High Street and Church End. The cause is likely to be a combination of increased wide traffic load and the long wet winter. In truth, this has been a problem for some years, with some sections of roads severely increasing in width. The conditions this winter appear to have accelerated the effect. The Open Spaces Group will discuss this in the coming months and bring before the full council proposals of how we repair the damage done to date, but also how we may prevent this happening in the future. Finally, gravel paths. There has been a good, healthy debate about what work should be carried out on the paths. The one thing we agree on is that the Parish Council should undertake repair work this year. A revised specification has now been sent out to tender, and we hope to allocate the contract to the chosen supplier at next month's Parish Council meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that is all the items on the agenda. So we now go to general question time.
I don't know if you've already said to it, because I was late coming. I'm new to the village, I've been here 2 months. I live on Potton Road. These HGVs are still coming through in the middle of the night regarding
That's my boy.
regarding the signs to say 7 to 11.
Well, that was discussed earlier on. Highways don't have authority about it.
Yeah, but
if you
surely they can have a
details-
police car sometimes standing inside of the pub to get them.
I've had an email actually that's come in quite timely. It's something that's been discussed over many, many months at our Parish Council meetings, and I've been in contact with the police about monitoring traffic in the village, and I had this response today because we were promised some monitoring over just after the Easter period. So the response I had today was the review of the road use took place at the beginning of April for a 2-week period. During this period, 76 vehicles over the 7.5 tonnes were recorded entering the weight limit. That is not to say that all these vehicles were contravening the weight restriction. I'm aware that over the last few weeks the contractors have been implementing weekend and overnight closures to the village, which have been manned to allow access. Perhaps this is something that the contractors would look to continue on a more permanent basis. The level of non-compliance is minimal, and to allocate our resources to one village area on a permanent basis would reduce our ability to effectively patrol the 3/4 area that we cover. This is also an issue with weight limits in the village of Ellington, which is directly linked to the A14-A1 roadworks, which we have taken the same approach to. And that's come from our local police.
Well, that don't help you sleep. I have to have my bedroom window is facing the street. I have to have it open because it's so hot. So I'll get Arctics coming through 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
So Joe, did I read that right? That there are 76 infringements of the weight restriction?
Yes, but it doesn't. The email doesn't specify if that was during the ban.
Well, the 11 to 7 limit.
I think it's time that they took more action, because if they want to come and sit in my bedroom through the night, they can count how many is going through, because it's absolutely not on. It's appalling, because they've got a law there that it states on the sign they should obey it. And if they're not obeying it, they're breaking the law. So they should be nicked.
So that message has come from the police.
Well, I'm telling them that they should get, pardon my expression, their ass in gear, because they're not doing enough. They're breaking the law, and they don't care about the residents.
And that has been a long-standing issue, that the police will not come and enforce the restrictions on that road.
Well, that's totally out of
So we will
order.
continue to write to them, and if you'd like to write them as an individual, please do.
I will. I'll write to the Chief Cook's Board.
Yeah.
And I'd like this councillor to take this note for me, yeah? Maybe you can to get her some authority as well. Being sure the councillor.
And if you want to have a word with Ian as well,
Yeah,
because he's
yeah.
county council and he can speak to the highways
Yeah.
authority of the Cambridgeshire County Council.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Sorry, Margaret. Ladies first. Margaret.
We've been sitting here this evening in a democratic situation. We've got a wonderful democracy here in this country. We've got freedom of speech, we've got transparency, we're evolving all the time. We've had women's votes 100 years ago, we've had the televising of parliamentary procedures, and now we've got video here, which is legal. Now, when I didn't come to the last meeting, so I listened to the video, and I was very disappointed to hear one particular councillor saying he was constrained by the camera. Now, any councillor should be thinking very hard about this. If you don't like it, you've got two choices. You either ignore the little box on legs, or you do the sensible thing and you resign, because it's not acceptable to be constrained when you are elected, you are representing us here, whether people have voted for you or not, and it is not an elite situation. This is a very, very special situation in the Parish Council, because we are at the ground roots, the grassroots of it. So councillors must not be constrained by the camera. It's recording something, and it's recording it quite instantly, and people can access it instantly. And I'm quite sure that Andy can supply the number of people who are looking at the video shortly after the meeting, and that's the point. So it's a very, very important point, that video camera. And it has to stay, yes, because it's legal, but it's a very valuable information source. So thank you.
We get an average of 200 views a month. That's very much an average. It goes up to 1,000 for important meetings a month, and down to sort of 50 to 80 for non. So those are typically people that got 10 meetings that want to review it afterwards. So it is a value. I get lots of feedback from people saying thank you because they can't attend meetings, or it's good as an aide-memoir. My quick question was about the, we need to raise this, the street light. It's a parish council light that's on the crossroads. It's currently got a bit of tape around it because I think somebody's run into it and it needs to be repaired. If it's going to be repaired, could I request they put one of the nice new bright bulbs in it? Because currently it's obviously one of the old sodium lights. The crossroads is the darkest pit of anywhere, and as we know, it's a real safety problem there, traffic trying to cross that. Very, very little lighting. A quick win could be when the light's being fixed, and I know the contractors we've used put a new light out in here as a test, a nice bright white one. Could we have a bulb put in that one to make that crossroads a little bit brighter? Request?
Can I be controversial there? I
You
don't
certainly
agree
can.
with that, Andy.
That's okay. Democracy, as Margaret says.
Yes. To me, you see, if you brighten everything up, you can't actually see headlights. I'd much rather go across a dark road where I can see, oh, round that bend there's a headlight coming, so I will not cross. If it's flooded with light, you can't see.
What's wrong with a torch? We're in a rural situation.
That's fine. I'm happy with torches.
Yeah.
It's just that I just think,
Yeah, I see
leave
your
it
point.
dark, rely on your headlights.
Thank you, Doreen, for your comment. Any other questions from the floor? Ian?
I talk as a resident.
Yeah.
The weekend,
Okay, just gone.
I sat and watched a wedding.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 4 years I'd like to actually suggest to the Parish Council that perhaps it might be useful if they look towards the 4 years and what might come up over those 4 years, and perhaps start to actually think about what they might like to do, or not, as the case may be, on those type of events. Because there was lots of things that we saw, with street parties, etc. And I think perhaps it's something the parish should consider. Don't expect an answer, I expect it to be on the agenda for you to give it some thought. But you've got 4 years, there'll be, I suspect, more than 1 or 2 things in 4 years that perhaps you might like to celebrate. It may be just a village celebration because of something in the village comes up at 50 or 100 or whatever. But I would like to suggest that the Parish Council thinks about that and perhaps acts on some suggestions that they might like to come forward for the benefit of the village.
Thank you, Ian. Richard.
Peter, can you send a message to Mick George saying thank you very much to him?
Yes,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Mind you, this morning I was at the shop and a sports car came by to one of his lorries was opposite and it overtook round the traffic island and down, which I've seen before a few times.
We have thanked
I thank you quite regularly.
Please do. Yeah.
Okay.
I always give them away.
And I hope everybody else adopts the 20 mile an hour limit
Yeah.
when they go through. Because, slow down. But, just because these lorries are doing it. I try and do it whenever I remember.
But then you do get people overtaking round the traffic islands.
Yeah. Which is ridiculous. Thank you, Richard. Any other comments from the floor? In that case, I'd like to thank you all for coming along this evening. Good night.
Thank you.